Did you ever have an imaginary friend? I vaguely remember that I had one. I don't remember much about our interactions, but the best part was my imaginary friend's name, and I do remember that. Are you ready for it? Broccoli. I truly don't remember whether my imaginary friend Broccoli in any way resembled the green vegetable for whom he or she must have been named. I don't remember whether I even liked broccoli, the vegetable, as a child, although it's probably my favorite now. I actually don't have any visual memory of my friend Broccoli whatsoever. Those channels to my childhood imagination have long since closed. There have been other more famous imaginary friends. Calvin's friend Hobbes. Big Bird's friend Snuffleupagus was understood to be an imaginary friend for a really long time on Sesame Street. Then there's George, the imaginary friend of Caillou, that well-loved and/or irritating character, depending on who you ask, from a PBS cartoon that at least some of my kids, I expect, would remember. Last week, we heard Pastor Eric preach about the importance of play. That image of grabbing the handle on the zip line on the playground and whee, that really stayed with me. And I think it's a great segue into this idea of imagination illustrated by the concept of imaginary friends. Play happens in real time and in physical space, and often with tangible objects, toy cars, swings and seesaws, finger paints, Foursquare. Imagination, though, I would suggest, launches from play. Imagination takes us beyond our senses, outside our bodies almost, as we tap into ideas and creativity and contemplations that are beyond what we know and what we can physically feel. Close your eyes for just a moment. Imagine laying on your back on a great expanse of warm, soft grass. Look up at the clear blue sky and the puffy white clouds slowly ambling along. Do you see the one that looks like a rabbit? Or the one that looks like a peeling banana? Where is that teeny tiny airplane going that's drawing a line from one horizon to the other? Perhaps the most fascinating part of that exercise is to consider how all of our imaginations of what I just described would be unique in so many ways, even though we all heard the same words. Here are some other words that we can listen to together from the Gospel of John, chapter 2, verses 1 through 22. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water." And they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs, in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. After this, he went down to Capernaum with his mother, his brothers, and his disciples, and they remained there a few days. The Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. In the temple, he found people selling cattle, sheep, and doves, and the money changers seated at their tables. Making a whip of cords, he drove all of them out of the temple, both the sheep and the cattle. He also poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. He told those who were selling the doves, "Take these things out of here. Stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples remembered that it was written, "Zeal for your house will consume me." The Jews then said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered them, "Destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews then said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and will you raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking of the temple of his body. After he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they believed the scripture and the word that Jesus had spoken. What do you think about that water to wine experience? It doesn't seem like Jesus knew it was coming. I don't think that printed at the bottom of the wedding invitation was an asterisk and a note of instruction to guests, "Bring a special miracle for the bride and groom." His mother noticed something was up and prompted an imaginative solution, one that she couldn't even come up with. Do whatever he tells you. And out of the most basic and essential ingredients of life and religious practice, water for purification rituals, comes a most generous and fulfilling response: the good wine, the best wine. Imagination is rarely small. In my post-broccoli childhood, I remember my dad exhibiting tremendous imagination, particularly at birthday parties. Games were often developed on the cuff, and new ideas were tried spontaneously, some more successful than others. Imagination isn't a guarantee of success, of course. Knowing my dad's schedule and rhythm of life as I know it now, he may not have had time to plan and was suddenly faced with a group of kids who needed an activity, and fast. That leads me to my first conclusion about imagination. Imagination is unplanned. Now, this is a tough one for me. I want to be creative. I desperately want to imagine new possibilities, and I am available to do so between 3 and 5 p.m. on Saturday. I should also probably tell you this. My favorite website is my Google Calendar. My family will know that I am only partly joking. But hear me out. I go there to that calendar website or app to feel some sense of calm, some sense of control, some sense that I know what the heck is going on. Each person in our family of 6 has their own color, so I know generally who is where when. All that becomes more challenging with teenagers. My days get so full of planned, organized boxes of calculated, color-coded events that there isn't room for stuff like imagination. But I think imagination and creativity seep in when we least expect it. For me, it is often while driving from place to place. I use the voice note feature on my phone a lot, an inspired note about a paper I'm writing, something in a podcast that has deeply resonated. The fasting from certainty piece of this sermon title comes into play here. And honestly, I struggled with that word when I was thinking through the title, certainty. I'm not suggesting that we need to step away from that sense of deep knowing that is so critical to a life of faith. or that we should disbelieve factual information. It's actually sort of humorous to even suggest that we need to fast from certainty, as if we've been hanging on to certainty recently, and that is something we need to fast from. After all, as Pastor Pam mentioned, it was exactly 1 year ago this Sunday, March 8th, 2020, that this congregation last met in this space. I've been seeing memes on Facebook. This was the last week of normalcy and nobody knew it. If there is something that we can all agree on over this past year, it is likely that there has been a total and complete lack of certainty. Every time we thought we had figured it out, what was going on in our world and in our lives, something changed. But the kind of certainty that I'm talking about and suggesting we might fast from is this: faith that looks like check boxes. I've got it all figured out, and I just need to do this and this and this, or believe this and this and this to get whatever my desired result of faith is. Or the certainty that God is in my group, and most especially not in the group of the other. Or certainty that is disguised in language that indicates breadth and depth, but secretly inside, we think we've got it figured out. I'm talking about certainty that leads to blind obedience, certainty that doesn't leave space for a shift or a question, certainty that has created a structure to a faith system which doesn't allow for a glimpse of new understanding without the whole system crashing down. Certainty that each of us carries, regardless of political ideology. I'm not talking about the certainty of them. What is my certainty? What is your certainty? Fasting on certainty isn't saying our ideas are wrong, but it's holding them loosely. Are we dependent upon them? Are they expansive enough? At the same time, do they leave space? So here's my second conclusion about imagination. Imagination requires humility. What if what I think isn't the end-all, be-all? What if there's more? What if there's new? What if there's different? What if? When he arrives at the temple, Jesus finds a marketplace taking over a worship space. And you'll notice that he doesn't show up with a whip in hand, but he makes it on the spot. He drives out that which does not resonate with the true purposes of the temple, with the new creative understanding of Jesus as the temple. This is foreign, incomprehensible to those around Jesus. What sign can you show us for doing this? The Message paraphrases it, what credentials can you present to justify this? Put more simply, perhaps, oh yeah, Jesus, you're going to come in here and flip our tables? Prove it. Prove that you are who you say you are, because we are pretty certain you are not. It took 46 years to build this temple, and you're going to rebuild it in 3 days? Yeah, right. John tells us after Jesus was raised from the dead, the disciples were able to put this all together. Hindsight is always 20/20, isn't it? What do we miss when our eyes are draped with certainty? When our knowing is so secure, so evident, that we are unable to imagine the possibilities that are right in front of us, that we are unable to even consider the imaginative ideas of others. What do we miss when we don't humble ourselves to possibility? There's a third conclusion that I have drawn about imagination. Imagination is rooted in awe. I want to tell you about imaginal discs. I don't know if you've heard of this idea. This was new to me. I had not heard of it before. I was certainly aware of the process of the caterpillar turning into the butterfly, metamorphosis. When I taught third grade, this was a highlight of the science curriculum, probably just as much for me as for the students. Finding monarch caterpillar eggs on milkweed is a challenge because they are so tiny. But there were always a couple of students and their parents who were able to find some and bring it in. We'd set up the empty fish tank with some chicken wire on top, put in a whole bunch of milkweed and some twigs, and watch them go. Much like Eric Carle's famous children's story, they were, in fact, very hungry caterpillars. And they did, in fact, eat and eat and eat, although we did not provide pickles and ice cream cones. And eventually, the monarchs create a beautiful green chrysalis with gold specks. And you wait a few days as the chrysalis becomes transparent and the butterfly emerges from within. But there's more to the story. When those caterpillars create that chrysalis or that cocoon, depending on the type of caterpillar, they don't just poof, flip from caterpillar to butterfly. Those two phases of life actually have no structural compatibility. The caterpillar's body breaks completely down inside into some sort of oozy goo. But within that goo are these special cells called imaginal discs. They've been there from the very beginning, present in the tiny caterpillar egg. And it is in those cells, in that goo, that's go time for the imaginal discs. They activate and begin the process of growing the new parts of the new creature out of the remains of the old. I love that term, imaginal discs, and the idea that it represents. The seed of possibility already present in what exists, just waiting for its chance to do its thing, to create something completely different, totally transformed from the original creature, at whatever time it happens to be ready to do so. That's pretty awesome. Sometimes it's water to wine awe. Sometimes it's flipping tables awe. Sometimes it's caterpillar to butterfly awe. I think that the imagination we see in these stories in the Gospel of John does not originate from Jesus' humanity. It originates from the grandness of God in Jesus' divinity. These are all signs that point to God. Jesus is not turning water to wine on his own. Jesus' prophetic power in the temple and word in deed does not come from within his human self. We understand these texts to be further explanation of God's intent for life and for the temple, God's intent for worship and for community. And Jesus gives examples of how this might look with God's power. These are passages demonstrating God's imaginative intent through Jesus' human expression in ways that humans will understand. God is love and creativity and imagination, the very essence of life. Imagine that. The fourth and last conclusion that I have drawn is imagination is a gift. Now, I need to clarify because this was mentioned in the children's story. I don't mean a gift only to certain people. I see it as a gift that God is continually giving. I was familiar with John Paul Lederach's work, before I began my current PhD program at George Mason's Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution. But I've had an opportunity to become more well acquainted with Lederach's work in these past few months. Some of you might be familiar with his book, The Moral Imagination, The Art and Soul of Building Peace. In it, Lederach indicates that his definition of this moral imagination is the capacity to imagine something rooted in the challenges of the real world, yet capable of giving birth to that which does not yet exist. Let me say that again. The moral imagination is the capacity to imagine something rooted in the challenges of the real world, yet capable of giving birth to that which does not yet exist. Imagining possible solutions to real-life issues beyond that which is already known, something totally new, never before considered, imagining what can be. 1 year ago, I had just found out that I was accepted into this program at George Mason, and I started imagining what it would be like. 1 year later, it is almost nothing like I imagined. Not just because of the obvious things, like I haven't stepped foot on the campus, and all of our classes have been online, and some of my colleagues haven't even been able to come to the United States, and they are taking class at 3 o'clock in the morning, but because I have now become part of an amazing and unexpected community of scholars and practitioners who are tackling with energy and positivity the greatest human problems in the world right now: prevention of genocide and mass atrocities, conflicts in the Middle East, the United States justice system, how neuroscience and the brain affect individuals' ability to relate to other people, inclusion of and basic human rights for all people in all places, regardless of gender identity or race or sexual orientation or socioeconomic status or nation on a passport or religious preference. What a gift I have been given to be exposed to the imaginations of others and have the opportunity to explore my own. What a gift at the wedding in Cana, when Jesus turned the water not into just any old wine, but the good wine. And the further gift in allowing the credit to go to the bridegroom. What a gift as God creates a new kind of community through and out of the temple. The imaginal cells of Jesus' teachings and actions are planted for us and within us. The essence of God's love is right here, waiting to be explored and amplified through our unique combination of talents and passions and circumstances. A gift indeed. Mary Oliver ends her poem, The Summer Day, with these words: "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" So what is it? What do you imagine? And what does God imagine for you?